my daughter's my rock. And I was like, why don't I feel any love? I was planning my suicide. I was planning how I was going to kill myself.
Looking on the outside, no one's going to guess that things are even going wrong for you.
Out of nowhere, the realtor shows up and catches me on the ladder ready to jump.
I just don't want to live the same way anymore.
Nobody would suspect that. Nobody would even ask. I got down on my hands and knees for the first time in my life. I understand that things happen for a reason.
You're listening to the Begin Again podcast, where real stories of addiction, recovery, and transformation take center stage. I'm Gary Menkes, and each week we bring you honest conversations with people who chose to stop surviving and start living. These are the stories that remind us healing is possible. No matter where you've been or what you've faced, it's never too late to take your power back. Thanks for being here. Let's begin again.
Welcome back to the Begin Again podcast, where we share our stories of those of us who have transformed our lives in sobriety, community of incredible comeback stories, and all the beauty and potential that lies on the other side of alcoholism and addiction. Joining us tonight to share his experience, strength, and hope. He's a motivational speaker. He is CEO and founder of Hype Recovery and the executive director and founder of Empower to Recover Foundation. He is Jay Barnard. Jay, welcome to the show.
It's always interesting when somebody gives you an introduction like that. I'm grateful to be here on a Monday. Yeah, it's funny that you say all those things because at one point it was never like that. You were not saying, motivational speaker and CEO of Hype Recovery or the executive director of Empower to Recover, which is helping people all across Canada and the world. But we all got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, amazing. Right? Titles, even the titles change, right? What are your thoughts 17 plus years ago of that? If someone told you that was going to be, you're going to be introduced as how we just introduced you, what would be your thoughts? What did 17 years ago, Jay, think?
Well, there's no way that was happening. You know what I mean? I just didn't understand. I didn't understand that you had to work on yourself. And I didn't understand that, I don't refer to myself as an alcoholic or an addict. I look at myself as a healaholic, healing from trauma. So really it's the trauma that drove me to pick up drugs, drove me to watch porn, drove me to eat a lot of food, drove me to shop too much, drove me to gamble too much, drove me to, it was always the constant trying to stay away from myself and the feelings and the emotions, you know what I mean? Like anger and fear were the biggest ones, right? And that's what drove me to staying away from and getting to know who Jay was.
I'm glad you said that, because you just said a real mouthful there, and you said work on yourself, right? And I came in to stop drinking, Jay. That was the only reason. I was just like, I can't do this anymore after a long bout and 4 years in and out, ugliness. As all the sayings, belly full of booze and a mind full of sobriety, really tough place to be, and all that stuff. I can attest to that. It is true. But it wasn't until I started working on myself when I started in recovery. And you just mentioned fear. I didn't realize how angry I was. I didn't realize how fearful I was. And, but if you and I were out together, I don't think, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have called you afraid of anything. And you wouldn't have said that guy's not afraid of anything also. But as soon as I started doing that work on myself, I could put fear next to everything, man.
Yeah. No fear on the streets, right? And you had to have anger in order to survive because it's a survival mechanism. But when you get into recovery, it's just, you don't know how to be honest. You're really dishonest because you don't even know what honesty is, right? For me anyway, right? So, but this is my first time ever into recovery. I never, February 11th, 2008, 17 plus years ago was when I ever really went for help. I may have saw a counselor here and there, but I never went for help. Help for me was taking a vacation in jail or, but the cycle would always be the same. I would bring drugs with me into jail and I would do selling drugs in jail, just get out, start selling drugs again. And, the fact of the matter is, I came from a broken family. So I think that had a lot to do with the trauma as well. I was born Jay Corey and my mom and dad divorced at a young age. I ended up failing grade 3. There's a lot of bullying going on, so I think a lot of us, and the two common bonds in life for humanity, and this is why Empower to Recover is alive today, but the two common bonds in life with humanity is everybody's got a level of trauma, everybody's recovering from something, and everybody has a story, which essentially means there's an endless supply of hope. But if you were to say that to me back then when I was beating myself up, beating my trauma up, right? That's what it was. It's like, how do you ask for help? I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to share these things. I don't want to look weak. I don't want to, especially when you've been bullied a big chunk of your life. You know, you've been called fat, you've been panched at school, you were the outcast, last kid picked on the team. Like all these things you got to really, now that I work with people and understand what recovery is and what working on yourself is and what being addicted to healing is, because that's what you want to do. You want to get addicted to healing. You want to keep leveling it up, you know? And I've always looked at myself like I'm Luigi in the Mario, you know, you keep hitting a rock, then all of a sudden, bam, you hit the mushroom, boom, you grow up a little bit, right? And then every once in a while, you'll catch that star, and that star's, yeah, you're just going, and then bam, you lose the star, you lose the mushroom, you're small again, bam, right? But that's what recovery is. You got to keep leveling it up. You can't stay stuck and stagnant, you know? And, you know, that was like my biggest problem was like, you know, A, who am I? B, how do I even get to know me? C is I'm so scared and so full of fear, which is false evidence appearing real, to know who Jay is. Am I Jay Corey? Am I Jay Barnard? Am I who am I? And like when you lose that identity, it's like you got to find an identity in something. Well, that something is a mind altering substance. It doesn't matter what it is. That's why I said the common bond in life is trauma, and everybody's got a level of trauma. Everybody's is in recovery from something. Right. So it's kind of funny where it's like alcoholic, addict, sex addict, food addict. It's all the same stuff. It's all trauma. It's trauma. It's what it is. Right. And once I figured that out, I was freed. I was freed from the fact that I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not an addict. I used these things in order to mind alter myself, to not look at who Jay was, not even knowing that Jay is a phenomenal individual. If he gave himself some time, he gave himself some love, he gave himself some compassion and kindness, if he was gentle on himself, if he allowed himself to do things right, gave myself permission. I never used to give myself permission for anything. You know what I mean? Just saying to yourself, I'm going to allow myself to love myself today. That's a powerful sentence.
That is a powerful.
I'm going to allow myself to love myself today versus I'm a piece of garbage. I hate myself. I dislike myself. I'm not going anywhere in life. Life sucks. The world's against me. Trump said what? It goes on.
Right.
Right. But how about just saying, I'm going to allow myself to love myself today?
You know, I absolutely love that. I love addicted to healing. I love everything you're bringing here. You weren't joking. You said you should bring it, man. You know, I got a question for you though. And I guess it's a two-part is, you know, without going back just yet, because I do want to go back there, but, you know, where were you when you asked that question of who am I? And that's part one. The second part is when you start talking nicely to yourself, you know, a lot of us, our muscle memory, our subconscious are, you know, we've been 20, 30, 40, however many long it may be, I've been telling ourselves it's buried into us. It's kind of, you know, it's in our being. It takes a long time. Well, you know, I'll use myself as an example. You know, I heard the saying, you know, all roads lead to I suck. I didn't realize, you know, how low self-esteem, how, you know, less than I constantly really thought about myself until I started doing that work on myself. Where were you in your recovery where you asked the question of who am I? And when did you start flipping the script of talking to yourself nicely, telling yourself a nice story?
Well, I think if we were to think back when it started, who am I? Right? Like that was probably grade 3 when I failed grade 3. And, you know, there was a grade 3-2 class. I failed grade 3. The grade 2s went into grade 3. I went with the grade 2s into grade 3. I was Jay Corey in grade 3. I was Jay Barnard in there. And that's when the kids started looking at me differently. So I was like, who am I?
Yeah.
And I also started packing on a lot of weight at that time because I got addicted to food. Food was like the first thing I got addicted to numb my pain. I'd eat so much food and then I'd get myself sick, eat more food.
Yeah.
Right. So I think probably around the age of 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, 8, 9, 10, maybe somewhere there is where I was like, who am I? And then into the recovery side of things, it was like, I went to the Salvation Army Anchorage Boost Center on George Street in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And it was around 3-4 months or something like that. They're like, you're going to go home. We're going to send you home on, I think it was Easter long weekend or something. I'm like, I can't go back home. Are you kidding me? Like I'm going to use if I go back home. And it's like, what do you mean you're going to use, if you're not using here, why would you use back home? You know what I mean? It's like, you can use anywhere. It doesn't matter. That's why I always kind of found it interesting. It's like, well, if I leave here, I'm going to use. It's like, you can use anywhere. You're walking outside the treatment center to go to a meeting. It's right in front of you. You can use if you go to meetings, right? So it was around probably 3-4 months, somewhere there. And they sent me back home. And there was parts of Kenora, Ontario that I didn't even know were here. You know, I've lived here I was born and raised here. I remember my grandpa taking me by this boat. I was like, Grandpa, when did that boat get there? He's like, Jesus, Jay, that was 1967. I don't know, in a boat, you know what I mean? But I was not physically, I didn't have the capacity to think about a boat at the time when you're beating yourself up with trauma. You care less about a boat. It's like, when are you going to get the next fix so that you don't feel, you know? So, but what I learned from that trip is that, you know, it was like the first time I ever saw my family love me out of my eyes, you know, and, you know, yeah, they were still on eggshells, and yeah, I got to 4 months and 3-4 months, whatever it was, somewhere in there. But I saw, you know, because I didn't have clear eyes, so I didn't see this love. I always saw they're against me. They put me in this position. They were the problem, like the blame game. You know what I mean? It's your fault I'm doing this. It's your fault. You know what I mean? Come on, get some ownership. And so then I went back to the treatment center, and I was on the pink cloud. And I was like, oh, yeah, I could go back home. Yeah, I'll just go back home. Yeah, that's it. I can leave the treatment center. You know, all these things, you're already starting to plan. You know what I mean? I was always interested when people say I relapsed. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And they're like, well, I went out and used. And I'm like, no, the end result is you used. You've planned out your relapse, and you manipulated yourself, and you've made this plan to go, I'm going to do this at this certain point, but this has to happen. And this happens, this is going to take me here. And then the last resort is you're going to pick up whatever it is to kill it. Now, you may not start where you started off before. You may start where you are. You might start light. You might start low, whatever the case is. But the end result is when you pick up something. All the feelings, the emotions, and the way you're talking, that's your relapse. You're planning it out. So that's what happened. Next thing you know, I find myself on Elgin Street going into this pool hall, and, you know, I have no reason to be in a pool hall or a bar at this point in my life. You know what I mean? You know, I knew that I had the problem, but, you know, I didn't quite understand that, you know, back then when I was doing the 12 steps and program, I didn't understand the second part. My life was unmanageable, you know, so because I was, you know, I didn't like the word powerless either. I'm like, I'm powerful right now because I'm not using this. I'm powerless if I am using this. So I didn't really understand it. I didn't really understand the language a little bit. You know what I mean? It's just, I was looking for something different, I guess. And it's okay to say you're looking for something different because everybody recovers differently. And that's why Empowered to Recover is around today. But when I was there, I left there the next day. I went there, and it just, the paranoia started setting me, right? Like those same feelings. I know I'm doing something wrong, setting myself up. I'm planning this. If I go here at a certain time, this is going to happen. Planning it out. It's just, you know, and I went there, and nobody would come talk to me. Nobody would look at me. I felt the place was full of police. You know what I mean? I was getting shut down by the coke, you know, so then I went back. The third night I went back there, I went right to the bar and asked for a Budweiser, and out of the corner of my eye, bus 11 came. I dropped the beer, ran to bus 11, got me back to the treatment center. And that's when I lost it on my counselor. I was just like, this place, I'm better out there doing what I was doing. I can't handle this, and I can't handle any of this anymore. Left the treatment center, went to the airport, $40 at the airport. Nobody would offer me a drink. Nobody would bring me a menu. Back in a cab, back to the treatment center. I'm wondering if my life is unmanageable here. Losing it back onto my counselor. And she just simply said, Jay, go upstairs and write down everything you changed. And I was like, everything's changed in my life. So at this point in my life, it's, you know, no direction, don't want direction, anger, fear, self-centeredness, selfishness, pride, everything is just getting in the way of like even trying to hear any kind of positivity, except just wanting to get that one thing and give me one excuse to get that one thing, which is I need to get this in me so I don't feel this way. I don't want these feelings. I don't want these emotions. I don't want none of this. And I went upstairs and I wrote down 2 things. I was at the time saying I was clean and sober and going to meetings. And I'm like, how can this be 120 days? Nothing else on this list. And then when she was like, and if you can't think of anything, go around the treatment center and ask people. And, you know, at this point, like my anger was bad. I had gotten a couple fights in the treatment center. And so I went to the people that that I got in these fights with, and like just instant gratification. Yeah, Jay, you changed. And they'd run away. And I'm like, yeah, I knew I changed. You know what I mean? Like the ego right away. It's like the ego gets in the way, and it's like, yeah, I knew it. But then the other counselor came and she's like, Jay, you're walking around a treatment center asking people if you changed. Your life has become unmanageable. And like at that moment, I heard my head pop directly right out of my anus. And I was like, man, ego, self-centeredness, selfishness, pride, running my whole life, all my life up until this point right now. And I'm like, I am now in that moment. I am so scared to leave that treatment center. I'm like, I can't leave. I just identified 4 crucial things that were the masks of what made me, which are the fear, the self-centeredness, the selfishness, and the pride. Now I'm left with just wrong. I can't, no, I went downstairs and begged to stay, and she's like, you're going to do it my way. And if you don't do it my way, you're out of here. This is where it changed for me. So I went upstairs and I got down on my hands and knees for the first time in my life. And this prayer came out of me. And, it's God, give me the strength, courage, hope, and faith. Keep believing in me, trusting me, having faith in me. Keep loving and caring about me unconditionally. Give me patience, tolerance, understanding, forgiveness, compassion, and acceptance of other people's struggles along with my own. Let me love myself, like myself, care about myself enough to move forward in a positive direction. Let me be comfortable with who I am and what I'm doing. Let me live in the day, the moment to live on life's terms. My Lord, I turn my will and my life over to the care of you today and guide me in my recovery. Never give up. Keep living the dream. That's what came out. I had the best sleep of my life that night. And I woke up and it was the first time I ever looked in the mirror and there was like a little smile. And I was like, what is that? And at that moment, I knew that might have been surrender. You know what I mean? Because I was at this raw point of, listen, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. My best interest got me here. Like I can't be doing this anymore in myself. I'm going to not make it. And so that was somewhere in March, April, May, somewhere in June of 2008, where I kind of clicked in and went, I got to ask for help. I got to ask the universe to be there for me. I have to take suggestions. I have to remove my ego, my pride, my self-centeredness, my selfishness in order to hear anything good. I need to be of service. I need to give back. I need to be open when somebody gives me criticism and not, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of like the turning point in recovery. Now, I've struggled with that throughout the 17 plus years of the ego, the pride, the self-centeredness, and the selfishness. I mean, that's something that, I think we all struggle with. And then you get to a certain point with those 4 antidotes that you're just like, I don't want this anymore. And so those are the shifts that made the early on shifts that made me really understand, maybe you're worth it, Jay.
What do you attribute that incredible prayer that you just wrapped out for us, which is absolutely stunning and beautiful? Where did that come from? Were you praying much before then, before this moment, before that?
Well, I mean, the Salvation Army is a faith-based program. So, I mean, I was going to service every morning. I mean, I was, I started in a 12-step program. I mean, I think we all start in a 12-step program. I think that's kind of where we started. I mean, I'm not in a 12-step program today, but, 12-step program AA was there from, So I think a lot of it just kind of was like everything that came together, but just, I needed something that made sense to me. And it's okay to say that I need something that makes sense to me. It's, if you're happy, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Right. But the problem is we're going to let other people make us not happy because we worry about what they think.
Right.
It doesn't matter about what anybody else thinks. It doesn't matter about, you have to be happy. And if you're happy and that offends somebody, that's not your problem. You're working on you. Right. So I think the prayer just, and I mean, that was really early on. That was 17 years ago that thing came out, and I even ended up staying in the treatment center for an extra almost 2 months. I almost stayed there 6 months. I didn't like the word graduation. I didn't understand that. It's like, you're graduating from your treatment program. And I'm like, what am I graduating from? A Texas Mickey to 10 Texas Mickeys? Am I graduating from a quarter pound of crack to, what do you mean?
Right.
What am I? And for me, when I heard that, I was like, that sounds like I'm setting myself up. I'm like, and they're like, they handed me a dictionary and they're like, well, find a word that makes sense to you. You know, I came up with the word transitioning. I found transitioning in the dictionary, and that's really what I was doing. I was transitioning into society. I was transitioning into being a better Jay. I was transitioning into learning how to love, learning how to like, learning how to accept, learning how to forgive, learning how to. I was transitioning into a second stage home that was going to give me the ability to understand what finances were. And it was going to give me the ability to understand, man, I'm looking at 5 years in prison for my fifth possession of the purpose of trafficking cocaine. Maybe if I'm doing the right things, transitioning into this place and keeping myself, you know, in the good corners of life and getting a lot of the God dope, maybe things are going to be good for me. You know what I mean? And so I used that word transitioning, and, you know, I am the only long-term person in recovery from that set of guys back then of 96 guys. You know, out of the 96 guys, 16 of them committed suicide and overdosed.
Oh man, that's, so which I know is going to lead us to what you're doing today, which is what we talked at the top, I think offline. But I got to ask you, you were given that gift of surrender. I say it all the time. That's what I was given 19 years ago. Was finally given this gift of surrender, and I had I didn't have a prayer like that. My prayer was, God, I don't want to live this way anymore. I just don't want to live the same way anymore. And that was 19 years. And that was, I had said earlier, I was in and out for 4 years. When I said that prayer, when I said, I just can't do this anymore, please help me, things changed. That's when things changed. But you talked about, I love, and I'm with you 100%. There's no graduation here. I'm not going to, what am I going to graduate to? I'm not going to get to anywhere, but, there's, all those terms. I wish you a long, slow recovery. 19 years ago, I was looking at those people cross-eyed. What are you talking about? Totally understand what.
It's good people trapped in a broken system. That's all it is. And to be completely honest with you, they don't know any different. And then it's just the policies and the red tape and all the things that are inside of a system. Like the system's burnt out. That's the truth. And, so of course, if you say you graduated this program, that is probably going to set it up for, you said you went 4 times.
Yeah.
Fucking, I ain't going through there 4 times, man. This is my first time in recovery. I ain't, but no, not going back to script. No.
Tell us though, I mean, you must have started doing work in yourself, right? And tell us, what was the time frame and how did you come to, because I know people in long-term sobriety, as do you, that still struggle with telling themselves that happy story, telling themselves the good story, being happy, period, right? We're here. We want to be happy, right? We went through it all. Well, let's leave productive, happy lives. What was the time? How did that work for you?
Hey, everyone, quick break to tell you about Recover. That's RCVR. If you're on this journey of recovery, you already know it's not just about quitting. It's about rebuilding. It's about self-discovery and reclaiming your best life. That's exactly why I created Recover, a lifestyle brand built for us, by us, those who have walked through the fire and come out stronger. Head over to recoverbrand.com. That's RCVRbrand.com to grab your Recover gear. We wear it as a daily reminder that you're not alone and that your story is just beginning. And because you're part of this community, use Recover20 for 20% off your first order. And wear your story, share the message, and end the stigma. Now back to the show.
Well, when I went into second stage, which was the Liberty House, which was a year program, I ended up staying there like 14 months. But I was also looking at 5 years in prison for possession of the purpose of trafficking cocaine, which, I wasn't really, like the lawyer said, Jay, 50-50. I mean, come on. We know you're doing good, but, 5 times is a little stretch here on you doing good. So even in that moment, I know it was like 2 days of me beating myself up. And then it was, dude, you did the crime. You got to do the time. Like you're 28 years old, 5 years is probably 3.5. You're going to probably be 31, 32, get out of here. You still got a good life ahead of you. And you'd have 4 years in whatever jail, prison, recovery you got. You know what I mean? And if you manage to kind of keep yourself okay, then you could probably just start your life at 32. And, that's what I accepted, and I went back home and, and Judge Frazier, God bless him, he was the first one that ever saw anything in me. And, before my family did and all that stuff, but I wasn't ready to listen to my family. But like the first person that ever saw anything in me was Judge Frazier. He was the one that gave me the chance. He was the one that gave me, and, I showed up in a suit and yes, sir, no, sir. And he's like, where's Jay? The guy that's yelling, swearing, gray, ripped clothes, dirty. He's wearing a suit. Yes, sir, no, sir. And He's like, oh, we're going to give you 18 months probation versus your 5-year sentence because it looks like you're doing well. And at that point, I had also started my apprenticeship to be a chef at Algonquin College in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. So I was really like moving forward in aspects of that. But what I learned in that situation is if I'm willing to ask for help, others are willing to help me. If I'm not willing to ask for help, how does anybody know that I'm going to need help? They can't just look at me and go, you need help. Most of us just look okay. We're fine. Meantime, fighting an army inside our head.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was like the first time I realized if I ask for help, others are willing to help me. And, that 5-year sentence got turned into 18 months probation. He allowed me to go back to Ottawa, Ontario to fulfill the dream to be a chef. And that's when I went back and I just dove into being a chef. I wanted to learn everything about being a chef, everything about food. I wanted to make the sexiest plates. I wanted to be the best chef in the world. And through that time, I started branding myself as Chef Recovery. And I was calling myself the recovering chef at the time. And then my pastry chef, Simone Choi, she said, why don't you say Chef Recovery? Holy shish kebab. I can brand that. And I'm like, man, that's amazing. Chef Recovery. And that's what I did, and I started doing that. And there's a paper on the back wall. I mean, they did this big article in Ottawa, the first paper I was ever, the front page of being good. No, like he got busted with cocaine, just a story of my thing. And then that's when my career really took off in that aspect of things. But you ask when it changed for me. So in year 1 and 2, year 1, I did the 12 steps, a step a month. Went over to NA, same program. I was just saying, I'm an addict, not an alcoholic, same 12. So I'm like, this is because I never did the program. So I didn't know, but I was a smart enough guy to kind of pick this up. But, I was like, what, just same. So I did the same 12 steps again in the year. And I came to that end of that second year and I was like, how come I don't know who Jay is yet? And it's just Jay. And yeah, sure. I understood what higher power was. I understood what cleaning myself was, step 4. I understood what making an amends was. And that's the other one I didn't really understand. Making amends before you make an amends to yourself. You got to make an amends to yourself before you go out and make an amends. That's why a lot of people get themselves into some hot water because you'll go say sorry to Gary and you're like, what? And then that's a big enough excuse for you to go put something in you, right? And so I was working at the Delta Hotel and the HR team came up to me and said, Jay, we think you should go see a relationship coach. And I'm like, excuse me? I have great relationships with women. And they're like, oh no, Jay, this is for you. And I'm like, God damn, that stung. Now I didn't even really have good relationship with women either. But I mean, this, the chef that was at the Delta Hotel, which was Kenton Lear, he gave me my first opportunity. He taught me at the college. So, they had they knew that I was in recovery. So I saw this relationship coach and she gave me the sales pitch. At the end of it, she came and she's like, it's $1,000 for the month. And I'm like, $1,000? And she's, and I was like running in my mind and I'm like, wait a second, I go to these meetings, they're free. And then I'm like, wait a second. Why is it when I didn't go to a meeting, I'd go back to the treatment center or the second stage home and I'd lie about going to the meeting because people would judge me and tell me I'm going to relapse? Like, why was it like that? And why did I feel it? I handed her my credit card and it was the first time I ever made an interest of an investment in myself. I made an interest of an investment in myself by paying her to teach me what she learned. I'm not saying I wasn't making an interest of an investment going to the rooms, but some of those times I was in the rooms, I was on my phone and I wasn't catching anything. I was outside, I wasn't catching anything. Right. So I made an interest of an investment on myself. And at that moment where I gave her $1,000, it was like, it's go time, girl. And I'm fucking here. I'm calling you every day. You're a sponge. I want to know it all.
Yeah.
The other thing is she never said I was an alcoholic or an addict. She said, Jay, you're dealing with trauma. And that's where I picked up healaholic. And I was like, hey, do you think I could say I'm a healaholic and I'm addicted to healing? And she's like, that's brilliant. I'm like, yeah. And So what I would say, I'm an alcoholic or I'm an addict, the only thing that I could comprehend with that, and there's nothing wrong if you say that to yourself, but for me, this is my story. But,
Yeah.
all I could think about was prior to February 11th, 2008. That was it. I wasn't drinking during the time of February 11th up until those 2 years. I wasn't using anything. So the only thing that I was thinking of was back then, which is past, which stands for preoccupied about spent time. So I was spending a lot of my time reoccupying about it in the past when I said I was an alcoholic, because all I could share about was the war stories. All I care about is I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't do this. I can't go here. And more times than not, all of a sudden, all those can'ts leaded to a can. And that can would be, or that can would be. And I was like, I can't do this to myself. Like I can't. And so, and she started teaching me things like thinking, thoughts, patterns, triggers, series of events, boundaries. And I was like, what is this shit? Why does this make so much sense? You know what I mean? And I'm like, and every time I said I'm a healaholic, healing from I was just like lit up. I ended up staying with her for 2 months. I paid her $2,000. And then about 65 days after that, I went to my home group. You know what? What do you think the first thing they said to me when I walked in there after not being there for 65 days?
Where you been?
Did you relax?
Right.
Coming in bright. Sail was up. The ship was rolling. The boat was strong. No scurry, no turbulence, no waves, was doing well. You know what I mean? And then they're like, do you want to share? I'm sure I'll share. So I shared about what I gained in these 65 days of making an interest and an investment in myself, and understanding that there was other ways to recover, that there just wasn't one way to recover. If the 12-step program worked for you, great. It worked for me in the beginning. It got me from the ground to my knees and from my knees to standing. But I couldn't see a life beyond recovery there. I couldn't see the life. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say that you found recovery somewhere else. It's okay to say that you don't work a 12-step program. It's okay to say that stuff.
Yeah, it is.
And so for at the end of the day, it was like, they're like, doing your program wrong, not enough God, all these things. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this, and God bless. And I walked away from the rooms that year too. And I started this journey of self-discovering who Jay was, this journey of holistic approaches, this journey of sound therapy, art therapy, gong therapy, water therapy, this journey of different mentors and coaches, different practices, different healing modalities. And I landed myself up in Fort McMurray, and, within a year there, my family was there. I moved there, and God bless my family for giving me the opportunity to go there. My mom and Rick, and my mom and Rick have supported me tremendously. Today, even to this day, they still do. A lot, actually, today, to be honest with you. But I landed myself up and I became a celebrity chef there. And I started doing things with Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier, William Shatner, Snoop Dogg, Leonardo DiCaprio. All these things, I started opening up for me. I learned, but inside of that same breath, the ego, the self-centeredness, the selfishness, and pride came into my life a little bit, because I was doing some things with certain people, which then brought my level of my stature up, which allowed me to travel Canada and be a motivational speaker. But also traveling Canada allowed me to see what the gaps and the holes in the system were, why people were struggling as heavy as they were. But, I was like, I want to learn recovery different.
We got Messier up on my wall behind me, actually, dude. The Rangers won the cup back in '94. But Jay, what an incredible story, man. Tell us, though, where's the shift? Because it's a really incredible journey you're on, right? Yes, 12, just like you. And I say this probably every episode. I don't care how you get here, man. If you need to be here and you're here, right on, brother. I don't care. If someone asks me how I got sober, I'll tell them my story of how I got sober. That's not to say that's the only way. I'm totally aligned with you there. But where does it, now you've had this notoriety, you had this amazing article in Ottawa, front page. Now you're rubbing elbows with the great one and Mark Messier and all these celebrities. You're fulfilling your dream as a celebrity chef. Where does it dawn on you that you also want to take this and you want to start helping people?
I was helping people, when I was motivationally speaking a lot, like that part of, selling out places and telling my story and going across Canada, but in 2015, I did a TEDx talk, And that's where it kind of clicked for me. I'm like, if I could ever just get like lived experience individuals from all walks of life, because like I said earlier, the common bond, everybody's got a level of trauma. Everybody's recovering from something. Everybody's got a story, which means an endless supply of hope. Right. So 8 billion people on earth have an endless supply of hope. And whatever the number is, I don't even know the number on earth, but I just threw that out there. But at the end of the day, when I was at that TEDx talk, and then I went and looked around and went, man, if I could ever just get like businesses, products, services, information, knowledge, all of these different ways to recover, to show people that there just isn't one way to recover. And then listen, if you're stuck and stagnant, maybe try it this way. Give yourself a chance. And I manifested it for 8 years. Over that 8 years, I moved back home and I had a beautiful daughter by the name of Destiny, which changed my life as well. And, Julie and I are great co-parents today. And then, Julie was like, why don't we call her Destiny? Because you're on a destiny. And I got, Destiny on my arm. And, and just having a baby girl, really, there's something different about a baby girl versus a baby boy. And, she just really taught me to be humble, and she really taught me, what love was. And, she really taught me about, it was like before I got on here, she called me when she got home and she's, Daddy, is it the podcast or me who's more important? And I'm like, sweetheart, it's you. I'll call you at 7. You know what I mean? And, at the end of the day, she's just been my real rock and helped me, through some real tough times, in life. And, some of this little human probably doesn't even know what she's done for me. You know what I'm saying? And, so I manifested it. I ended up opening up a restaurant called the Boathouse. Then I ended up opening up my own fish processing plant called Freshwater Cuisine, where we took all the underutilized, undervalued, underappreciated fish in the lakes and turned them into products. Basically took the waste and made them. We had a thing called the walleye wings, which was on the menus across Canada. There's a fish wing, our veg wing, chicken wing, and we were the fish wing. We were 1 in 5 top businesses in all of Ontario. Got a $25,000 check from the Premier Canada, 20 under 40 top leader, all this stuff. But COVID came along and I lost $2.5 million. We lost the business, and we're talking, I'll just back it up a bit there because I want to talk about the suicide and stuff, because I told you early on that, some of us in long-term recovery, we do struggle. And a lot of us aren't sharing about the suicidal idolization stuff. And a lot of us aren't sharing that, sometimes life just kicks you right in the teeth and you just don't want to be here anymore, even though you have 10, 12, 15, 20 years. And it's okay to say, I don't want to be here, as long as you're saying it so that you can get the help you need. And in 2018, Destiny's mom and I separated. And my grandfather died a week later, and I didn't really know how to regulate the grief. And I just come off of selling out the Shaw Center in Ottawa, Ontario for my 10-year anniversary of being in recovery. I left that place going, nobody got anything out of me. And when I was in the room, I was like, if I go back home and I hug my daughter and I don't feel any love, I'm going to take my life. And this is where I talk about we plan these things. So I was planning my suicide. I was planning how I was going to kill myself, and I came back home and I hugged Destiny, and I love my daughter, man. Like, my daughter's my rock. And I was like, why don't I feel any love? And I went to where my best friend hung himself, and it was the quietest day. One of the quietest days I've ever heard. And out of nowhere, there's a dam in front of me. The water just came flooding out of the thing. And I'm like, whoa, what am I doing? And climbed down the tree, and I was like, I gotta go see my counselor that got me into the treatment center. I gotta talk to somebody. So I went and saw Sandy Paul, and I told her everything I'd done over 10 years. And she just simply said to me, Jay, have you ever said you're proud of yourself?
Yeah.
And I was like, she's arguably, you've catered the best hockey player in the world. You're speaking all across Canada, helping people. Like, you used to dine in dumpsters, and this is what you're doing today. And you've never stopped and said you're proud of yourself. And, she was right. I never did. I never took that time, and I share this because there's a lot of us that get to long-term recovery and we don't say we're proud of ourselves. You know what I mean? And it's like, what's next? And, that was a turning point for me in 2018, where I almost took my life. At that point too, when that happened and the water came out of there, it was like a symbolic thing that God said wasn't done with me yet. So that was another shift. And that was another level up in my recovery of understanding, like, dude, you work your ass off every day, be proud. And that's where that turning point really got me to that self-love, that self-caring, that self-compassion, that self-worth, that level I had to get to at that point. But COVID came and lost all that money. And that's where I kind of just launched into this recovery program. It's like, I'm going to build Hype, which was Hype Recovery, which is a 6x12 online, which basically I just took everything I learned from that relationship coach and everything I was speaking about over that period of time with Rick Robichaud, who's the Sober Biz Co., my mentor, Robert Ware, Sabrina, and Ashley, who was we were the recovery couple for a period of time before we separated. And we made this program. And we launched it on with 5,000 Days into Recovery, which was October 10th of 2021. And something beautiful happened. People just started reaching out from all across the world, 72 different people. And I was like, what is going on? I'm just a small little sardine, you know what I mean? But this other thing happened where 500 people reached out and they're like, hey, I'm on a wait list. Hey, there's no pre-treatment. Hey, there's no aftercare. Hey, I can't get a doctor. Hey, and I'm like, God, do you really want me to do the biggest dream of my life? One thing is to do an event in your city and only your city. But when you start talking about doing it across a country of 13 provinces and all the cities and towns, a lot of people get scared of that. I'm a big time thinker and a big time dreamer. So for me, I'm always thinking the biggest I could possibly think. But at the end of the day, it's scary for people to hear stuff like that, and because they're dealing with their own fear. And so I brought it to the team. I brought it to Brooke and Carl Heath, who's our chief program officer. And I'm like, I got this idea. This is where it came from. And I want to call it Empower to Inspire. And, Brooke came back and she's like, well, that name's taken, but what about Empower to Recover? And I'm like, holy cow, E2R. Like the two means we're together. It means there's no labels. It means all forms of recovery. It means everybody's recovering from something. That doesn't matter if you're a cancer survivor, sex trafficking survivor, PTSD, anxiety, depression, alcoholism, drug addiction. Doesn't matter if you're youth, doesn't matter if you're indigenous, doesn't matter if you're Indian, Filipino, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The doors are open to everybody. This isn't an anonymous place. This is a Recovery Aloud place. I was like, holy, what is this? And I got obsessed with it. I got obsessed with building this. Now, when you get obsessed with things, you tend to also forget about some important things in life as well, which was a relationship I was in at the time, which we're really good friends today. So that worked itself out, which is great. And she's coming up on 6 years in recovery in September. And I met her at 5 months. So that's really, I'm proud of her for that. And, but, when we did that first event, May 27th of 2023 in New Westminster, BC, I was, 120 people showed up. We had one of my good friends, Shamri, 2-time Grey Cup champion with the Montreal Alouettes, kick us off. We had Kids Play involved. We had the Salvation Army there. We had Tesla beds there. We had different treatment centers, second stage homes. Last Door was there. Brooke shared about losing her younger brother to a fentanyl overdose. Scott talked about losing his wife to suicide and building his family. He's a devoted dad. Carl talked about, energy-wise, how movement is medicine, because movement really, truly is medicine. And we had Beatrice Love there, who was a singer on for Canada's Got Talent, semifinalist. And I was just like, at the end of it, I was just like, wow. And we raised $14,400 and something dollars. I mean, it cost $50,000, but at the end of the day, I got some of it back. And I thought to myself, if nothing ever comes past here, you done it again with the help of everybody again. You went out and lived the dream. You didn't allow fear to get in your way. You didn't allow people telling you that it's not going to work. You didn't allow people telling you to recover. You allowed yourself mission. And my speaking career took off after that event. So I went to Calgary the following week and I was too excited to share about what just happened in BC. So I'm sharing about what happened and they're like, well, when are you coming here? And I'm like, is Canada really open to a loud guy in recovery? Is Canada really open to all forms of recovery? Is Canada really open to all the facets and all the different stories and all the hope and all the inspiration. Is Canada open to uniting everybody underneath one roof? Is this possible? So I went on a plane back home and I was like, if we sell out Kenora, Ontario, which is my hometown, which it's harder to sometimes do stuff in your hometown, we possibly have something. And we did. We ended up selling out. 225 people, raised $26,550, cost us $24,000. At that point, we had $2,600 to go into recovery scholarships to help people. At that point, we introduced youth. So we had a girl on the platform who got into recovery 4 days before her 16th birthday. She just celebrated 2 years. She's 18 years old now. We had an Indigenous speaker talk about watching his sister burn in the house. He couldn't get his sister out. And that's how it activated everything. We had MPP Greg Rickford share about losing his younger brother to a fentanyl overdose stairs. And I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. Then we went to Calgary. We sold out Calgary. But here's where I was going through my stuff at the time. So here we go again. I'm going into 16 years into recovery. Here I go again, take a big hit of losing the money, which is massive grief. Go through another 4-year long-term relationship, grief. I'm sitting in the room in Calgary planning to take my life again at 16 years. And, nobody would suspect that. Nobody would even ask. It took me everything I possibly had to get to that event, to do that event, because I was at a point just like, why does, understand that things happen for a reason. And in order for me to get to the next level, I need to be shook right down to nothing in order to come back up. And that's how it always has to go. But sometimes, when grief hits you and you don't know how to regulate it, it's like that train that just smokes you and you don't know what to do. And, I left there. That was November 21st of 2023. And November 24th, I planned to take my life at the fish plant. I was going to hang myself off the rafters. And 6 p.m. at night, nobody should have been at that fish plant on a Sunday. And out of nowhere, the realtor shows up and catches me on the ladder ready to jump. And once again, God's not done with me. And once again, I was like, man, you need to clean your slate, man. This is, you're a long ways into recovery here. This just isn't yesterday, and yeah.
You talked about giving yourself permission, right? Getting over the fear. You've accomplished so much and you're so honest with, looking on the outside, like you just said, no one's going to guess that things are even going wrong for you, right? And here you are sharing your truth and God saves you again. For sure. But how do you start telling yourself, where were you? Let me frame this a better way to help our audience. What's a word of advice you can give our audience to get over some of those fears? And what is the other piece of advice? People that are struggling, maybe they're looking good on the outside, maybe they're not looking good on the outside. What's your piece of advice for those people that are having those thoughts?
I think so. What I did is I knew that I was right hip replacement in 2024. I knew I was coming up on that. So I took the opportunity. I went right back to the basics of my program, Hype. And I took the opportunity. I wrote a surrender letter and I wrote a rebirth letter. I was like, this is what I want to surrender. So all the negative talks, the way I'm talking to myself, the ego, the selfishness, the pride, the getting in my way, the cutting myself down, the being hard on myself, broken relationships, all that stuff. I want to replace that with love, kindness, compassion, gentleness, but honestly do it this time. I'm not telling you I never got to close to 100%, but I don't think I was ever fully at 100%. And I really needed to take a look at this. And I'm not saying go and get a hip replacement, but this was my opportunity. I was coming up on a hip replacement. So I was looking at it. So I read the letter at home. I burnt the letters. I took the letter. I had 2 copies. Then I brought the second set of letters to the hospital and I read the letters in front of the nurses and the surgeons on the surgery table. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I got to just do this. Because I was looking at the anesthesia was the death. So the minute they put me to sleep, I'm dead. When I wake up, that's the rebirth. So everything that I said I wanted to surrender was going with me when they put me down. When I woke up, everything that I was asking for on the rebirth was going to happen when it was supposed to happen, but it was going to be a new slate for Jay. It was going to be a new slate for me. We had some great success in 2023 with doing 3 cities and 3 provinces. We wanted to raise 50 grand. We raised 60,056 bucks. We had some great success. We had amazing speakers. But they moved me back into the recovery room, but they moved me up too fast. My heart rate and my blood pressure dropped. I almost had a heart attack. Now, I had been manifesting this rebirth, but I wasn't really saying, God, take me now. It was like the anesthesia is, don't take me out on a heart attack. But I was in the tunnel, halfway down the tunnel, there's this white silhouette. And I got up to the white silhouette and I said, what? I woke up and I was wrapped up in cold towels, elevated. And I'm like, what is going on? Oh, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. And I was like, what? I just had a hip replacement. A couple hours later, they came by and they said, hey, Jay, do you want to start getting up and start moving around and walking? And I'm like, get up, start walking. What are you talking about? They're like, hey, this is where the 12 steps comes in and where I started, which I kind of giggled at because they're like, if you can walk the 3rd floor and then go up 12 steps and down 12 steps. I'm like, that's funny, God, the 12-step program. That's right. You know what I mean? So I'm like, yeah, I can go up 12 steps and down 12. No 12-step program going to beat me. And anyway, so, and then, they're like, we'll let you go home. And, so I went in there at 8:30, all that stuff happened. By 4:30, I was at home. But, when I was getting pushed out in the wheelchair, I just remember the door. And then the biggest weight, I never, ever felt this before, just this big weight. I was like, what is that? I mean, like, what just, I didn't shit my pants, but what was that? And then stuff started happening. Like a couple weeks later, we got one of the biggest donations we ever got, which was $10,000 from the Hunter Family Foundation. At the time, I'd been trying to work to get my U.S. waiver. I had a U.S. pardon. It would taken me 15 years, cost me, I had to go through $66,000 unpaid fines, 12. Anyways, the U.S. waiver shows up and I'm like, this is unreal because who works, who consistently goes 15 years to try and get this? You know what I mean? I mean, they took it away now and I'm got to go back and get it in 2026 because there was a flag in when I tried to go to Calgary of a possession of the purpose that they forgot to knock. And I guess the U.S. government thinks that I'm going to come there and sell drugs since I was 2004. But anyways, I'll be able to get that back in 2026, hopefully. But then just like little things started happening, and, I like to always tell this story. It was our 4th event going into Timmins, Ontario. And, I was at 6 weeks into recovery and the doctors were like, Jay, don't go. Jay, like your mind recovery is much different than your body recovery. You cannot compare how you are in your recovery from your trauma as your leg. Yes, that's trauma, Jay, but that's something healing inside. That's a piece of metal in there, Jay. Anyways, I was like, I gotta go. And, I drove to Winnipeg, which is 2 hours. And I was just, I went to the hotel and I was just sweating. I was like, maybe they're right. Maybe I still went, I was in a wheelchair all day. My knee locked up, 2 planes, get to Timmins, can't unlock my knee. I'm at the car place. Car dealer guy's like, is everything okay with your leg? Yes, sir. Everything's fine. I can drive. No, nothing. It wasn't fine. And, I get to the car and I'm like, how am I going to drive? I just hit my knee as hard as I can. My knee pops. I'm like, well, I guess I can drive. I get to the hotel and I didn't even think about how I'm going to change because I can't bend over. So I can't get my socks off, can't get my pants off, so and I'm like, man, these people were right. I like, and then also on that surrender and rebirth letter, it said, you ask for help no matter what. You never cancel an event and you ask for help no matter what. And I was like, do I got to go knock on hotel door rooms to ask somebody and roll the dice that maybe a guy's going to pick the door and he's got to come help me change? And anyways, I go out and corner of my eye, I catch the cleaning lady. I'm like, cleaning lady, that's a good bet. Hey, miss. And so she comes over and, yes, sir, I'll help you. And she's like, you won't even believe it. Like my full-time job is a nurse. Yeah, my full-time job is a nurse and I work here on my off time, which my off time is this week. Did you just send me a nurse? Yeah. And she's, between the hours of 7 and 8 in the morning, we'll help you rehab your leg for your event. And I'm like, what is going on in the pool? So I've been in the pool 7 to 8 and she'd help me, do little scissor exercises. And I was like, what is going on? And you know what was going on? I was just showing up. Showing up is 99% of life. If you can just show up 99% of the time, that 0.1%, not there. If you don't show up, that 0.1%, that's what takes you down the road. So I've always just showed up, and went into that event. We had one of the best events. Kalichi from the USA was there. The first time we had an international speaker, a good friend of mine. And, I was on the stage all day, but when we left, when we started that event, it was snow and they're like, nobody's going to come. And I'm like, snow brings out people. Don't worry, we're sold out. But when we went outside, there was no snow and it was sunny. And I said, we just brought the biggest love bomb to Timmins that Timmins ever saw. And I said, all we had to do was show up. That's how it's been. We're rolling into event number 15 here on June 13th in Fort McMurray, Alberta. We just finished Cornwall, Ontario. We've now had 165 different individuals speak on the platform from all walks of life. Our keynote speaker in Cornwall was Lee Theodore, who is dealing with spine cancer as we speak. He did chemotherapy, not chemotherapy. He did some kind of therapy for his cancer the morning of the event and wasn't 100% sure he could come and speak to be the keynote speaker that night. It's just great.
Too, it sounds incredible, but it brings me to my, obvious next question is, where can we find you and what's on the horizon for Empowered to Recover?
You can find me at www.empoweredtorecover.com. So that's the number 2. That's the website. You're going to find out all the information there, all the different cities we're in across Canada. You can also find us on social media. So, that would be Empowered to Recover Foundation on Instagram. That would be Empowered to Recover Foundation on Facebook. You can also find me at Chef Recovery. That's where you found me on Instagram. What's on the horizon is we got, to date, like I said, 165 speakers. We've partnered with 137 different organizations. We just started the process of launching the GRC, which is the Global Recovery Community, which is going to be a subscription-based community for people to come in. So it's really difficult to get help. And we wanted to kind of make this an easier process for people through the SPA process, which is service, process, access. What's your service? What's your process? What's your access? I don't need to know anything else. What do you have for service? What's the process? How do I access it? And we got a little bit of funding in for that. So the back end of that is starting to build. It's an opportunity for podcasts. We have a TV show, musicians, also because music therapy is huge. Podcasts are huge. We need to build the world's largest recovery community and have everybody in that recovery community so that, it should be, you're the plug-in, we're the socket, where you plug in. So we're building that right now. We have Fort McMurray, Alberta coming June 13th. Then we got Regina, Saskatchewan coming August 15th. Then we got Thunder Bay, Ontario coming August 30th. Then we got Kenora, Ontario coming September 6th. Dryden, September 12th. Fort Frances, September 19th. Saskatoon on the 26th. Then we're going back to the East Coast. October 10th, we're in Charlottetown, PEI, and hopefully October 25th, we're in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And then we're going to round it off in Edmonton, Alberta, doing the Strength and Recovery Power Through Community Gala and hitting another Indigenous community because we also do Indigenous community events as well. So that's Wabdoon. So yeah, what we're doing is we're building a movement and a platform for the people, built by the people, for the people, with the people. To date, we've raised over $260,000 to help put on all these events. That's all public money. That's all people money. We're not funded by the government in any shape or form. So everything is through ticket sales, booths, community booth sales, community partnership packages. So we're always looking for national and international partners. We do actually have an international partner in Smart AI. They're actually doing some great work. Dino Miliotis with Dino. Yeah, Dino's they're doing great stuff with the watch, and that's some really cool technology, which I think is going to really elevate what recovery is and how people can get help. And so we've partnered up with them. So we're always looking for international and national partners on all levels. Obviously donors. If people want to make donations, they can make donations right through the website or get a hold of us at empoweredtorecover@gmail.com. But really what we got to do is, like I said at the start, everybody's got a level of trauma. Everybody's recovering from something. Everybody has a story. Essentially, that means that, it's an endless supply of hope. And in today's world, we need an endless supply of hope to show people that there's all forms of recovery. Not everybody's recovery is the same. Gary's foot doesn't fit in my shoe. Jay's foot doesn't fit in Gary's shoe. But what is Gary doing that can help Jay? And what is Jay doing to help Gary? And am I open enough to hear that there's different solutions to help myself get better? And that's really showing people that recovery not loud. I think in a time right now where suicide overdose rates are at an all-time high. And I mean, suicide just isn't about addiction and alcoholism. I mean, the word recovery just isn't, if you say you're in recovery, people go right away, you're an addict or alcoholic. That word recovery is so much more than addiction and alcoholism. There's so many people out there recovering all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
It's the stories that bring us together and unite us and show us that, wait a second, I'm healing too. Wait a second, I'm not alone. Wait a second, I found a home. Wait a second, I want to be a part of this.
Amen. Amen. We're gonna have all the websites and all your socials on the show notes where we can all find you. Go give them a follow. Go check out the website. I got to ask you one final question. It's kind of what I ask most of my guests, but yours is even especially empowering to ask this question is, what's your piece of advice to young Jay? If you bumped into Jay from 16 and a half years ago, say somewhere before before February 11th, 08, what's your one piece of advice to your younger self that he can thrive on and that your audience can thrive on as well? As you said, you're doing God's work, my man.
Be gentle, be kind, love myself, care about myself, self-care. Don't be so hard. Allow myself to be open to change, to evolve. Allow myself to give myself permission to do things differently and allow myself to elevate and know that it's okay to do things differently and that not everybody's recovery is the same. That we all have a story and my voice is powerful so that I could use it to do God's work like we are doing God's work. But I think most importantly, just tell myself I'm proud of myself that I've made it as far as I could at this point. And, a lot of people, I've just been so grateful and just full of gratitude with everything that I've ever been able to accomplish in recovery. I owe everything to my recovery, but I also owe everything to trying it differently. I owe it to, learning and knowing and understanding that I had to switch it up and it's okay to switch it up, and I think I would be saying that to myself is that just be open to doing things differently, Jay. Don't get stuck and stagnant. Don't get tired. Don't think that it's over. Don't think that you need to quit. Don't think that you got to give up. If the turbulence starts getting tough, that means the biggest breakthrough is going to happen. And if the biggest breakthrough is going to happen, that usually means you got to try something new and be open to that. So that's what I would tell myself.
And love that. Love that and recover out loud. Bud, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been a pleasure to connect with you. It's a pleasure to hear your story. We're going to have a part 2, I think, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love that.
Absolutely. Like I said, go give them a follow. Go support GRC. Go support Empower to Recover. Jay, pleasure being with you here tonight.
Thanks. Thanks a lot for having me. Hey, big love.
Big love.
Thank you for listening to the Begin Again podcast. If today's story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that healing is possible, we'd love for you to share it. Subscribe, leave a review, and help us spread the message that no one is too far gone to begin again. And if you're ready to wear your recovery with pride, visit us at recoverbrand.com. That's RCVR Brand.com. And until next time, take your power back.